I want to welcome you. When Brian and I were talking about this earlier this year, and we were talking and saying, it'd be really great to take our local labor market plan and our employer one and kind of present it back to the community and some of those businesses, because sometimes we know that data, it's confusing, it's stressful, and if you're not used to seeing it, you're like, I don't know what I'm. For those of you who don't know, the Workforce Planning Board, we've been in existence for 27 years. We are funded by the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development, and we are your local labour market expert for Waterloo Wellington Dufferin. So what does that mean? That means we do research. We take the research and we do analysis on it. We talk back to our community and say, hey, what's going on? We're seeing this weird number. What are you seeing? And a few of our partners in the room are always happy to give us their perspective. But we take that and then we create products and opportunities to share that information or create best practices wherever we can. So our Employer One survey is an every other year survey for businesses that actually helps speed programming choices. Economic development uses it. Lots of organizations use it to kind of get a sense of what's happening with business and how can we start to fix some of these challenges. So it gives them the data they need to move forward. And because we get to meet so many wonderful people in the community, sometimes we're that connector. So I'll give you a really great example. I was working with one of our economic developments in the rural area, and they really want a skilled trades program. They have no funding. They don't have a program for skilled trades, and we all know we need skilled trades. I think that's been beaten over our heads for 20 years now since I started working in this area. So what did we do? We tried to get some funding. The funding failed. Next thing we did, hey, we know this union over here that's got this boot camp. Let's connect you to. And they ran a camp. 8 people went through. And when we said, hey, how'd it go? They're like, we got 8 people? And I'm like, that's fantastic. And the union goes, no, you don't understand. We get 8 people in downtown Toronto. So it's like, wow, this really was a success for a small little rural town to actually add 8 more people into their construction sector. So we're really happy and proud of those sort of connector points. I'm going to say we don't usually engage in future forecasting. I'm not a futurist, so don't hold anything against me. I'm going to make that caveat for you. But when Brian suggested maybe looking towards the future, I do have a background about 15 years in workforce planning, so I have seen some trends. It's fair. I can do a little bit of this, so I'm going to try for about a year out. But I'm also going to pull some really great research from some others to talk about what this next year could bring us when it comes to our companies and when it comes to when we're looking for people. And I think I'm ready to move on. So again, thank you for being with us. And we'll kind of talk about how the past 6 months-ish have gone and where we're at. So just to set some context for you, I'm going to set some context for you, and then we're going to talk about industries, late 2023, early 2024, and I just realized before everyone goes crazy with your phones, you will get a copy of this presentation, and you will get a recording.
Thank you.
So you can actually then go and say, hey, I wanted to replay that part of what Charlene said. You can do that. Okay, so you can now just fully engage with everything instead of worrying about your notes. So what's going on in the industries? Get a really good picture of how employment's going and where the struggles. Then we're going to talk about the workforce, late 2023, early 2024. What are they doing? Because in any market, you have buyers and sellers. If you're an employer in this room, you buy talent. If you are an employee, you're a seller of your talent. Let's be really frank that that's the base idea of the labor market. And then what can we potentially look forward to for the rest of 2024 and early 2025? We didn't put this on the invite, but we're going to have you guys talk a little bit at your tables afterwards, because I know there's nothing worse than leading this sort of session and you have no one to talk to about what you just heard. So we have some questions for you. So let's start with context setting. And this is going to look crazy, and this looks crazy on purpose. So in case you didn't know, global population patterns are going to decline by 2100, okay? EU, that in the European Union, that means a decline of 27.3 million fewer people by 2100. We're already seeing that decline in our rural communities. So nothing that I'm going to talk to you today is unique to us. We have a whole world that's competing against talent, okay? So I don't mean to bring you down, but that stress is going to kick in. But just to kind of, so you understand that this isn't unique to us. This isn't unique to any government. This isn't unique to any area. This is a global challenge. In Japan, falling numbers have now made the Japanese wonder about their views on what they call outside people. We would call them immigrants, but in Japan, they're outside people. Because they're having a population crisis, they're having to really think about that. And here in Canada, we're starting to wonder if there's going to be an anti-diversity backlash because of the number of immigrants and international students come in. A lot of those stories are not positive. Let's be honest, okay? So we could see that happening in Canada. And countries are starting to look at labor in other countries. So Saudi Arabia has offered Kenya 1,000 jobs for nurses, and they're looking at agreements now with Canada, New Zealand, Australia. So they're ahead of us, right? So that's the other countries are getting ahead of some other countries. So it's going to become a winner-takes-all situation potentially. Recruitment is the new retention. We used to focus on recruitment, and now we really have to start focusing on keeping who we've got, and that's going to be a big challenge for us. And in the UK, they instituted the 4-day work week, and now the employees have the right to request flexible work from day one. So the UK is trying to get ahead of where everybody else is still thinking 4-day work week, and the UK is like, nope, you can ask for flexible work. What does that mean for our economy? What does that mean for our businesses? What does that mean for our workforce? This one upsets me, and we'll talk about it more. But a new report done by Hayes said that 71% of Canadian workers want to leave their job this year. I'm going to set this context for you. In March, there were 841,000 people employed across Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and Simcoe County. It's called our economic region. That's our most statistically sound data. That's why I'm pulling at that level. And if 71% of our employed workforce wants to leave their job, that means 597,000 people are looking for work, considering leaving. That's a lot of people. And we're going to talk, like I said, we're going to talk more about this a little bit later, but just kind of keep that in the back of your head. 84% of the workforce insist that job candidates must demonstrate soft skills. So this is job seekers recognizing that they have to demonstrate soft skills. So the conversation has now moved on where workers already know this. And if you're interested in global auto industry, they're worried about a skills shortage across the world, not just unique to Canada, not unique to anywhere else. It's now going to become a global auto skills shortage. And on top of all of this wonderful stuff, we have AI. So, this author is talking about the power of people skills. Is it going to be enough to keep AI in check? So there's a lot going on. And so this is why it's also great to kind of have these sort of sessions to kind of like, okay, that was overwhelming. Let's piece it out a little bit now. Okay, so that's what I'm going to try to do for you now. Oh, yeah, there's a few more challenges. I forgot. Housing our workforce. These 4 challenges I'm going to talk to you used to be about what's that called? Infrastructure. They used to be, oh, that's not important to our workforce. I would argue these are now some of our biggest workforce challenges. So housing our workforce. Do the units we have and we are going to build actually affect the wages in our area? So let me give you some data from 2020. If I'm making the exact median wage in Waterloo, okay, in 2020, I can afford $1,060 in monthly housing costs. Anything above that, and I will be at risk of losing my housing. In Wellington, that number goes up to 1,120, and in Dufferin, it goes to 1,130. So we're talking very small numbers. So if me and my partner both make median, we might get a little lucky that we can afford $2,000 in housing costs, but that is a very real number. Are we creating the types of housing that are half of our people could afford? That's what median means. It's in the middle. And then we have the people to build them. And that's a really big challenge as well. Do we have those skilled trade people in place to actually build the housing? And more so, do we have the laborers to do so? Because laborers are actually more in demand than skilled tradespeople right now. Childcare. Anybody have this challenge in their life right now? Because I think I've had a few people cry to me about this one. The availability of staff. So I don't know if you know, just earlier this year, the College of Registered ECEs said the average ECE stays in their occupation for 3 years. For anybody who doesn't know, ECE is a 2-year college program, and they're staying for 3. So that's a very big challenge. Operating centers on $10 a day. So an ECE, depending on how old the kids are, can oversee 3 to 8 kids. So that infants, one ECE will watch 3 infants. If the parents are paying $10 a day, the center only made $30. The ECE probably spent that money in 3 hours. So it is a challenge. So it's why you might be seeing some places deciding to opt out of this and spots being open. So our workers who cannot take a year off, cannot take 18 months off, need spaces for infants. And then the flip side of that is those who need after school and before school care, those are split shifts. I'm seeing some people nodding their heads. I don't know. Do you work in education? No. Okay. But the ones who need that split shift, it's really hard to find someone to do a split shift, 2 hours in the morning and 3 hours at the end of the day. So those spots are also a struggle to find. Transportation. One, how do we move people around our region? And this is like where the conversation on the ION and all that comes in, and the Highway 7 upgrade. The cost of buying and operating a car. I'm going to tell you how old I am, but I remember my first car cost me $3,000. And I think it ran for 5-6 years. If I buy a car for $3,000 now, it's probably not running, right? And I just spoke to someone, they're like, yeah, my friend went to buy a car, she couldn't find anything for under 15. And I'm like, wow, how do we expect people who are working minimum wage jobs to buy cars? And I don't know if anybody saw the price of gas today. $1.79, the highest in 2 years.
20% increase from yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, 15 to 20, depending on where you are. So yeah, so think about those sorts of things. To kind of demonstrate this, I once saw a job posting where the person was supposed to show up at any time, any day, and they wanted to have a car, and they're going to make minimum wage. I'm like, how can a person live on that? They're not even guaranteed hours. So transportation is a challenge, whether it's you're on the bus or the ION or whatever, or whether you have a car. And the big one is mental health. And there are so many challenges here, but I'll keep it short. The effects of the pandemic. So 2 years ago, there was already research stating that everybody who'd gone through the pandemic was probably having minor to major traumatic responses to that. And that includes everything from anger right on through to depression and anxiety. So we talk about our kids being anxious and depressed, and we talk about the little kids being a little on the angry side. It could be they're having trauma responses. Through to the awareness of balance in work and life. We know that that's a big challenge right now, and that's multi-generational. Burnout. There are a lot of people burning out. If anybody here is in education or healthcare, this is probably one of your biggest concerns. But if you're not, it's your middle managers. Your middle managers are trying to cover that front line, but they're also trying to respond to their senior managers. And there's statistics showing that middle managers are starting to burn out because they're kind of stuck in the middle of it all. Wait lists. One of my staff just sent me that Waterloo Wellington has a wait list of 4,000 people as of last October. So it'd be great if we get everybody services, but we can't because there's a wait list, and there's a wait list because guess what? There's not enough staff, and there's not enough money. So we have some very big challenges ahead of us. So my question is, what does that mean for us in Waterloo Wellington Dufferin? And before I go on, I want to say thank you to the Ontario Rural Routes. They're the ones who found the Waterloo map. And they support, it's a database. If you want to go on a rural adventure, check them out. Growing Great Generations, Gulf Waterloo, is an organization to support the development of youth and children. So I always like to talk about the nonprofits and what they do. And the last one is this beautiful portrait by Lisa Antonazzi. She's an Amaranth artist, and you can buy her drawings at the Museum of Dufferin, which is in the township of Mulmer. So if you're interested in any of those organizations, you can check them out. But still, what does that mean for us here? So let's talk about what we know. So I'm going to pull information from different areas. The first is the economic region, which is very big. It starts in Branchton, which is like south of Cambridge, for those who don't know, and it goes all the way to Penetang and Midland. It's humongous. It's more than 1 million people. And then there's our CMAs. Those are our census metropolitan areas. So basically, Waterloo region without Wilmot and Wellesley. The Guelph CMA is Guelph, Guelph, Aramosa, and Puslinch. And then there's Barrie is the third one. We're not going to talk about Barrie, but Barrie and like two or three townships around it. And that, when I take out those 3 CMAs, I get a good estimate of what rural's doing. So that's kind of where we're going to operate in. So I'm going to talk to you what each of these things are. So the unemployment rate is, let's take everybody who is working or looking for work, and then let's take about all the people out who are looking for work, and that gives us an unemployment rate. So Ontario's unemployment rate, as in March, which is our most recent data, was 6.6. Kitchener, Waterloo, CMA, you're sitting about 6.7. You've pretty much been tracking with the Ontario trend for a big chunk of the year. If you're from Guelph or rural, I apologize, but it is very low, your unemployment rate. Guelph's unemployment rate is 3.9%, which means there's 4,000 people unemployed in that region of Guelph, Belfair, Mosa, plus Lynch, and it's actually the second lowest unemployment rate in Canada among CMAs. The lowest is in Quebec. And rural is about 5.5. For anyone who doesn't know, 5% is considered full employment. So anything below that, you're looking at people who are harder to move back into the workforce. Okay? So I just want to give you that context that rural and Guelph are going to be struggling, those businesses. Kitchener, you've got a little bit of a buffer. Okay? So if you're from Guelph, you might want to figure out how to get people from Kitchener. All right? Participation rate. Now, the unemployment rate, you all know. We report it every month. You get it. Participation rate we don't talk about, but we really should start talking more about that. Participation rate is our whole population 15 and over, right? And then what percentage of that population is looking for work or is working? So how many people are participating in the market? So Ontario's is 64.3. It's okay. Kitchener's is 69.5. Guelph's is 72.7, and the rural is 67.3 in March. So that you know, 70%, and you are like amazing in this country. There's only 4 places that have 70% or above. Guelph's is the highest participation rate in Canada at 72.7%. So Guelph's got this situation of lots of people participating, not many of them unemployed. Kitchener's like, yeah, we got lots of people participating. We've got a bunch of people unemployed, so there's opportunity. And rural's kind of like in the middle of all that. We've seen Kitchener go over 70%. I do estimate it will go over 70% again. So we are, despite the fact that unemployment looks high, we are a region that's optimistic when it comes to employment. Our job seekers are still, we will hear stories about people who have pessimism, and I get that. But overall, the market, we'll talk a little bit more. Employment rate is, let's take that big population of 15 plus, and what percentage is working. So it's calculated differently than the unemployment rate, which always bothers me, but this is how it goes. So Ontario is 60%. So 60% of people 15 and over in Ontario are working. In Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, it's 64.9. Well, you're almost at 70% of your population working. And the rural ER is 63.6. The lowest in the country is Belleville. 42% of their population is working and participating. Like, they have extremely low participation. So you've got 40% of the population trying to support 60% of the population, whereas we're sitting at that really close to 70% supporting 30. It does help us a little bit. Job vacancies have come down. Those are the most recent statistics. The fourth quarter, which is of 2023, so about 23,000. Just for reference point, before the pandemic, we were about 17,000. So we're almost pre-pandemic vacancy rates, vacancy numbers, which, okay, this is looking pretty good. Our job postings cratered in September, and we're starting to see some recovery. Traditionally, Waterloo used to have, if I go about a year ago, it was like 15,000 job postings in Waterloo region. Wellington was usually about 1,000, Guelph was about 4, and Dufferin was 1,000. So they are less, but at the same time, they're recuperating. And we have heard from our partners that sometimes some of them are giving up on the digital versions, and they're going back to signs and who do you know and those sorts of things. Can't capture those things, so I have to capture what I can, and this is what I can capture. So overall, it doesn't look horrible, but there are challenges. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges. So we decided to look at, okay, 2016 was 2 censuses ago, 2021 was our last census, and I could find 2023 data. So who's recuperated since 2016, which is pre-pandemic, and has actually seen their labor force grow, like their employment numbers grow. So these are the 5 industries in 2023. They saw their highest employment rates since 2016. Okay, so they have recuperated. They're fully going gangbusters, just like they were in the pandemic. So you'll see manufacturing's had a little bit of a rise before the pandemic. It was 125.5. It fell just a little bit and then went back up to 125.8. They didn't see a super big shift. They're still our biggest industry here in, this is economic region data. I should probably say that as well, because it's really hard to pull out the CMA data. So they've kind of recuperated. Number 2 is healthcare. Look at that growth. 74,000 in 2016, 78,000 in the 5 years following, and a massive jump in 2 years. That healthcare workforce has really grown along with social assistance. I want to add that in there as well. And we know that healthcare still needs more people. We know that that's so required. Professional, scientific, and technical used to be number 4. It's now number 3. It beat out construction. So again, you see a nice little growth, 2016 to 2021, and then you see that massive jump into 2023. Finance and insurance, I missed one here. Construction. So construction again, it was small, huge. The only one that kind of grew slowly was that finance and insurance, right? So it's a little bit slower, but it's still number 5. It still is growing consistently, and it's had its highest employment that it's ever seen since 2016. So we have 5 industries that, their numbers have grown. Some of them could continue to grow, and they're going to need people. But let's talk about who's not having such a great time. So we're going to talk about some industries that their employment peak, so their highest levels of employment, were before the pandemic, and they have not recuperated. So these are the 2 where they're almost there. Information, culture, and recreation had its peak in 2018, and it's still down about 200 people from its peak. So that would be our museums. Information can be part of our tech sector, and recreation could be our gyms and things like that. Transportation and warehousing, its peak was 2019, and it's still down about 800 people from that peak. And I've heard some stories that there might be some struggles with that industry moving into 2024. We'll kind of have to see how it goes, because it's dependent on a couple of other industries, which we'll get into. These guys are down about 2,000. So agriculture had its peak in 2017, still down about 1,900 people. Business building and other support services, this is some weird thing the government's thrown together, but if you're thinking about the traditional NAICS, it's administrative and support, waste management. It's also some of the cleaning companies, things like that. They had a peak right as the pandemic hit, just before, and they're still down about 2,400 people. So they're having struggles. The last 2 are down a little bit more. So other services that are not public administration. So these are everything from our garages to our personal care services to some of the nonprofits sitting in the room. And some other organizations. I think funeral homes are in this. So it's a very broad, weird category, but it's service-based. Peak in 2019, still down about 3,000 people. And then accommodation and food services had its peak in 2017, and it's still down about almost 6,000 people from its peak. So we have some industries that are still struggling, but they have different reasons why they're struggling. Some are not fully recovered. They're still trying to, some not fully recovered, taking a hit for a year and not having events and things like that, not being able to go out and eat the same way you used to be able to and not spend those dollars, has really hurt some of our small businesses who are in these categories. But others just can't get people. So let's look into those who can't find people. Oh, the last thing. These industries have probably lost those people permanently in some cases. And most of these industries are providing service to businesses, to us, and to specialized clients. The last thing I wanted to say there. So we may, no surprise to any of us, sometimes service is a little bit slower than we like, and this is one. So let's talk about some of those vacancies. These are the 5 occupations where we had the most vacancies in our economic region. Let me start from the top. Business, finance, and admin. Admin has been on our findyourjob.ca website. It has been a top 10 in-demand occupation for about 6 to 8 months. It's going to cover multiple industries. And what people are looking for in admin jobs varies so much industry to industry. And are you looking for someone senior? Are you looking for someone junior? So it's not one easy solution. But also some of our finance and insurance people are in companies are looking for people in this sector as well. So they might be looking at some opportunity. The next one is occupations and education law, social, community, and government services. This is our ECEs. This is our developmental service workers, our shelter workers, our housing workers, our social service workers. So those supports in social assistance, so those who are technically under the social assistance group, so housing, DSW, and a couple of others, their industry is combined with healthcare, and right now healthcare has a 5.6% vacancy rate in Ontario. So that's the biggest vacancy rate in Ontario for industries. So there's a lot of jobs, and you can, healthcare was the next, health occupation, the next on this list. That's why there's so many vacancies sitting there, is because it's provincial, it's not unique to us. And if there is anybody who is in healthcare or social assistance, like the competition for talent is tremendous. I know not just for nurses, but for doctors, for medical diagnostic personnel, this new one that's popped up. Every time we turn around, there's a new one that's highly in demand. And if suddenly we had 500 nurses show up to Ontario ready to go, they would be scooped up in a heartbeat, and we'd say, where's the next 500? So it really is a challenge and a struggle. Our trades, transport, and equipment operators, so that's the next one. Drivers and helpers, so trades helpers and laborers, and drivers are the biggest vacancies, not the trades so much. And the trades have vacancies, but they're nowhere near like the need for someone who can take a wheelbarrow or do some basic carpentry, but doesn't have the certificate. So that's that. Transportation has a 4.0% vacancy in freight in Ontario. It's a little bit higher. And some of those people who are couriers or auto service technicians, that other services group had a 4.3% vacancy rate. And I'm going to say that if you have a child who's at all interested in cars, like that is the #1 money maker. If you have a kid who's interested in that, I would strongly recommend push them down that road. We looked year over year, and at one point our auto service techs had seen a jump in average wage that was like $10 an hour, where everyone else was getting like $2. They were getting $10. So just as that heads up. And then finally, sales and service. So that's our cooks, our food counter techs, our chefs, our salespeople, and that's retail right on through to I'm selling a product through a company, like a manufacturer. Accommodation and food had a 4.7% vacancy rate in Ontario, and retail had 3.4%. So there's room for people, even though there's room for people to move into these more entry-level positions as well as those more college-focused things. So I've kind of given you an idea of like who's growing, who's having some struggles, and kind of where the vacancies are sitting. So let's talk about what employers are telling us about why. So why is it hard to fill roles? And number one, 66% of our employers who filled out employer one said it's not enough applicants. Which if we think back to that first slide, population decline, some of our areas are struggling to find people. It's just not enough applicants. And it is a straight up numbers issue. We don't have enough people applying. So it could be maybe the mental health is a challenge, and so they're not applying because they're not there yet. They need to do something before they can move into employment. I do want to say that this survey was done in December, January, when we were kind of on the slump of demand, and this was still the #1 challenge. So it's not like it was done a year ago in March, and that it made sense. We were all going crazy trying to find people. This is when it was slowing down, and employers were still saying, I don't have enough people just applying to my jobs. Then we move into what candidates bring with them. So lack of experience, work experience is #1. That always gets me wondering if it's lack of Canadian work experience, which we're not supposed to ask about anymore, but employers still do have that in the back of their mind, you know. Also know that our youth lack experience, and we're going to talk a bit about why they're kind of lacking some experience as well. We talk about our different groups. Qualifications, lack of qualifications. So my guess here is that it's not necessarily post-secondary education, it's some sort of very specific qualification on this one. Technical skills could be technological skills, could also just be hands-on ability. And lack of motivation is always an interesting one, because I always wonder if it's about generational perceptions of motivation, or if it's actually motivation. Because there is a whole, there are generational expectations when you've been working a long time versus when you're new around what motivation looks like. And finally, the inability to compete with other employers. So that is salary, that could be culture, that could be how many managers you have on the floor, but you just don't feel that you can compete with other employers. So, are you depressed yet? Okay, let me talk about some lights, okay? How are our employers keeping people? 48% of our employers said that keeping people was a struggle through the employer-led survey. And they gave us the reasons why, because when we know why, we have, here's the data, now let's start working towards the solution, right? So 48% of them said that it was because there were not a lot of positions to move into. We run very lean, very flat organizations. That makes sense. We're mainly small businesses here in Canada. So it's hard to move into something else. You want to move forward, you want to move up to the next salary grade. If we have flatter organizations, it will be a struggle, and retention will be a struggle. 33% said we pay less than others in our industry, which always makes me wonder if they've actually done a salary survey. So I'm going to put a plug in. We're going to do, if you're a small company, how to do one of those for free. And then employees are struggling with mental health. Doesn't surprise any of us. We just talked about mental health. 24% of employees did not fully understand the position that they took. So we may have some communication issues back and forth between the employees and employers. And that has a lot to do with our job postings and job descriptions. And 23% believe that there's no housing for the people that they can hire. Like, if I hire people, there's just no housing for them, and that's why I can't keep them. So they're part of that. I have to have my housing costs at $1,100, and I have to move because my landlord evicted me, and I have to quit my job because now I have to live with my aunt who doesn't even live in town, right? So there's those sorts of challenges. It was interesting because after there were there weren't a lot of positions to do, our actual number 2 in response was other. And we had that a lot of employers told us that there's just a generation that doesn't want to work, or that young people are lazy. And I feel this with every bone in my body, because as a Gen Xer, this was said about me. And as a millennial, this was said about my brother. And it's being said about my nephew as a Gen Z, and it's probably going to be said about my nieces when we become Gen Alpha. So it's not necessarily that they are, it's that generation to generation we have different views of the next generation coming up. So, and if you're a boomer in the room, they said it about you too. So it comes that situation of young people's expectations versus more established, seasoned worker expectations, and what's the disconnect? It doesn't matter, we can talk about generations all we want, but I think it's a youth, older worker disconnect over a generational disconnect at this point. And that 48% that said there's nowhere to move in the company, half of them are training people. Think about that. I can't keep my people because there's nowhere for them to go, but I'm going to train them and give them brand new skills. You see where I'm going? They're going to move on because there's nowhere to go in my company. And you know what? I just gave them a whole bunch of new skills so they can make $5 more an hour. So what I think I kind of want to get is there are some solutions that aren't actually addressing the problems we have. And so that's kind of what that kind of came out for us is there are some employers who are doing things because they've always done it, but it's not actually fixing the problem. So needs analysis, needs assessments, things like that. If you're an HR in the room, those are probably going to help you out. So what does our employer picture look like? Some industries are taking off in employment levels, and they can hire a whole bunch more people if they showed up in Waterloo Wellington Dufferin. Some are trying to hire, and it could be stopping their growth. It could be stopping growth actually regionally. Others are kind of in the middle. They're in a little bit of a holding pattern. I didn't talk about education here. Education doesn't have the high levels, but I know there's a couple educators in the room, and you're like, could you get me 100 teachers tomorrow? And I'd be really happy. So, and manufacturing is kind of in that holding pattern. That's what we're hearing from manufacturing. It's kind of, we're slowing down. If we're not laying off, we might use temp workers. Let's see what that looks like. Employers are just not seeing enough applicants to their jobs, and when they do, they feel that they're lacking some skills they need, which we've been doing the Employer Lens survey. I think we're in their 8th year, and this is always like, these two things always come to the top. So this is not we can fix it really fast, because we've been talking about it now for 10 years. So just bear with us. Employers are aware they have retention issues, but some may be following suggestions that don't solve their engagement issues, or could actually be worsening their engagement issues and their retention issues. So think about it for a minute. Where do you fit? This is the mini markets part of it. This is where you have to now take everything and go, this is where I'm fitting. This is where we're at as an industry. This is where I'm at as where am I needing people. This is where I'm at on the retention issue. So it's kind of a moment for you to take a pause and go, this is where we're at. This is how my industry is different than my neighbor's industry. Because we are facing a little bit of this mini market where employers just have this wide variety of need across Waterloo Wellington. You're probably wondering, okay, let's talk about the shortage. Isn't it just people retiring? Come on. You know, I think the baby boomers, the youngest baby boomers are 60, 61. You know, take your CPP early, head on out, hit a cruise in the Caribbean. That's not exactly what's happening. There's a few things, but let's talk about age, because I think age is important to this conversation. So as a reference point, we call people who are 25 to 54 our core working group. Sometimes it goes down as low as 44. They have a 3.1 to 5.1% unemployment rate. Remember I said 5% is fully employed? 25 to 55-year-olds, most of them are working. So if that's your demographic you're trying to attract, you got to think about new ways to attract them. And they're participating at 88.2 to 90.5%. That's really good. And that's for our economic region. I'm going to share one of the astounding facts that I shared with the researcher, and he was flabbergasted, but we'll get to that one. I do want to say in Waterloo region and in Dufferin, we have more 45 to 54-year-olds leaving than we do arriving. Those are our mentors. So if you are a company that's thinking about a mentorship program, you can get that 30-year-old to mentor the 20-year-old. You may struggle a bit with that 40, 50-year-old to mentor the 30-year-old who you're hoping is going to become your manager. Okay, so just if you're thinking mentorship programs, we may struggle with more senior mentors across Waterloo and in Dufferin. I just wanted to share that with you. So yes, 51% of our population is not participating. 51% of our population that's not participating is 65 plus. Okay, so it's 405,000 across our economic region. If we drop it to 55, 61% of the population. Wait a second, I'm reading this wrong. Okay, of my population is not participating. 51% are 65 plus, and that jumps to 64% at 55 plus. Okay, so if we look at the total people who are not participating, 51% of that is 65 plus, and if we look down to 55 plus, it jumps to 64. So there is a bunch of people who are not participating and are in effect retired. We'll see if they're coming back. That's for us to talk about in 2024. Then we have the school factor. So this is our 15 to 19-year-olds. I call it school factor because most of them are probably still in school. They don't technically participate the same way 18-year-olds would be maybe more likely to participate because they probably graduated. Those 17-year-olds who have late birthdays. So that big not participating group, 13% is 15 to 19. They have a 43% participation rate, and they have an 18% unemployment rate. So those who decide to participate, there's a lot of them unemployed. Okay, so that's a frustration point for them. That 15 to 19-year-old who's graduated high school, maybe they've taken a gap year, or maybe they're just not heading to post-secondary. We have students who have disabilities and graduate, and they're heading for the workforce. We have students who just can't do, for whatever reason, post-secondary. They can't afford it. They don't have the mental health to do it. Okay, they need to work. And so a lot of those students are going to face early unemployment when they're trying to get started. Our new young workers is this next group. So that big group, 6% is 20 to 24. Their unemployment sits at 14%, but they're participating at a much higher rate, probably because they have graduated college, they're looking for that job, it's going to kickstart their career. So they're participating, but they're still facing double-digit unemployment in an area that has unemployment of 3 to 6%. So when we talk about youth, they do tend to have higher unemployment rates. And we've actually got an email from someone who was like, can you tell us what youth support programs for employment there are in the region? And we started making phone calls, and a lot of our programs are going to be closing in the next couple of months. So they're going to be losing some of those really targeted supports to help them coming out of high school and coming out of college. One bright little nugget, and kind of interesting nugget, it's actually led us to one of our projects this year, is at the end part of 2023, we looked at the rural region, 12 to a little bit, and we saw that more young women were participating in the labor market and working than young men. So traditionally, young men tend to participate at higher rates than young women. And we actually saw a reversal of that in our rural region and in our Guelph region 2024. It led us to do some investigating. And then we heard about the trend in the US where young men are actually dropping out of the workforce and choosing not to participate. So this year we will actually be doing some research on what's going on here because we have heard that young girls score better in school systems. There are more young women going to post-secondary, and now we're wondering if we've just seen this generation now moving into they're going to work more. So we want to kind of get a sense of that. So that was one thing we found interesting, and you might find interesting if you're from Guelph or you're from the rural area and you're wondering who needs the support. It might be your young men at this point over your young women. And this is the really blow your mind out of the water stat, according to my researcher, is that in that core working group of 25 to 54, we're at a 92% participation rate for men and women. Women and men in Guelph, like if you're looking for someone, like I'm not kidding, it's really slim pickings. And so if you are from Guelph, if you're an employer, you might have to think a little bit outside the box, maybe a lot more outside the box. Because he had never seen such a high participation rate and never women equaling men. So this is not just a shortage issue. This is everyone's working in some of these age groups, and it will be a challenge. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and let's look at skills. So 55% of our population has a trade or post-secondary education. 29% of them have a university certificate, diploma, or degree. That's for Waterloo Wellington Dufferin. So, because I can pull that, it's in the local labor market plan, so you can double check it yourself. Our immigrants we bring to Waterloo Wellington Dufferin, 56 to 59% of them have a post-secondary or trade education, and 48 to 57% have studied in Canada. So not only are they not only do they have that attainment, a lot of them have already part of the Canadian work structure, at least the Canadian school structure. So that's an interesting statistic. I think the 57 is up in Dufferin, and the 48 I think is Wellington. So Waterloo's in the middle. So it's astounding that so many of them have experience already within that Canadian cultural Canadian community. But according to Our 2023 look at the top 25 job postings in Waterloo Wellington Dufferin. Half of the top 25 require less than high school. Or it's on the job. You don't even need high school. And half of them would not support international students to secure permanent residency in Canada post-graduation. So they cannot move into those jobs and stay here. And that is a big struggle. And I think half of those jobs also don't pay a living wage. So they pay less than $21. So our demand, and don't think this is unique to us. This is kind of like, this is a Southern Ontario challenge because I do work with my boards across the province. And this is a Southern Ontario challenge, that this is what our labor market looks like versus our workforce. And what skills do employers want? So we ask them every year in Employer 1, what are you looking for? And so communication is the #1 skill. And Sonia, you want to wave your hand? Sonia did some work this past year about what does that mean? What does communication mean? So, she discovered that communication in retail is a lot different than communication in manufacturing. Communication in manufacturing, you get your arm crushed, right? Communication in retail, you're going to have a very angry customer, so you need to learn de-escalation and conflict resolution, and very different industry to industry. Those skills, when we talk about them, the sub-skills underneath are so different, and we have to remember that as employers. So when someone says, I have great communication skills, that follow-up needs to happen of, tell me about your communication skills. What are you really good at? Needs to be that conversation. #2 is dependability. From what we understand, it's, can you show up every day? In some, it's, are you sober? And are you showing up on time? Ability to work with little or no supervision. That one's pretty self-explanatory. I won't go into that one. Teamwork, interpersonal skills. I was at a conference and there was a gentleman, he was talking about AI, and I went up to him afterwards and I go, so you're telling me the future is people? And he's like, that's a good way to put it. Because AI is going to take over a whole bunch of other things. It's going to be about our personal connections. And that's going to be what, it was a great conversation with him, but that's how to sum it up, future's people. And work ethic. And work ethic is one of those things that I have a different view of work ethic than you do. I'm a nonprofit. I just want you to finish at the deadline. And then somewhere else, work ethic is you're going to show up every day, you're going to take care of this person. And another one, it's you can show up 5 to 10 minutes. So work ethic is very subjective, and it varies from individual to individual in this room, and it varies industry to industry. But we always like to ask, because we always like to know if it's going to shift. Work ethic at one time was #1, and you'll see it's small as #5. So, but these 5 are pretty much the top 5 that employers ask of their workers. So my question is, okay, we've talked a bit about, who's in the workforce. We've talked a bit about the skills. So we've also asked employers, are we accessing all the talent that we possibly can? And I know you're going to think that's the dumbest question in the world, but let me explain why. It's also my team's favorite question to be asked by employers and to give responses to. So I want you to think about this question. 1 to 100, rate your level of agreement around hiring with the lens to diversifying your workforce being an important part of your organization's strategy. So is hiring with a lens to diversity important to your organization? 1 to 100, come with a number in your head. I'm gonna take a drink. You got a number? You got a number? When we asked employers, that was the number. It was 60 out of 100 was our average. It's up from 2022 when it was 58.4. Thank you. So in Waterloo Wellington Dufferin, our employers do believe there is value to hiring with diversity. But then we got into the comments. And so employer comments seem to point to a belief that diversity and qualifications are exclusionary. I can hire for diversity, or I can hire qualified. You can hire both. But when we looked at employer comments, the comments seem to imply that they can hire for one or the other. Yeah. And that EDR hiring was discriminatory. So for those who didn't rate it as high, that was where they were coming from. So we do have some struggle of getting people to understand what diversity means, what qualifications mean, so we can have that mindset that name. Yeah, but I just wanted to know, like, let's get there. And what's your name? Allison. So we want to get to Allison's viewpoint that we can hire for both, and we got to get all of our employers there. Also, in our comments, ageism is becoming a big concern, both for young workers and for older workers. So our employers do feel that there is some ageism out there. Our employers are feeling it about their own workers, that they're recognizing there's, maybe I'm not giving the kids a shot. Maybe I'm not giving older workers a shot. Maybe I'm thinking through a lot of different things. But that was another part. And we asked employers how easy and effective it was to hire different groups, because we were wondering, where do we put our effort as a community? Like, who seems to be succeeding and who's not? Employers struggle more to hire persons who are Indigenous or who have disabilities. And they report that the easiest to hire is youth and women. So youth and women, they feel pretty good. They feel they can hire and onboard those people. And then the middle of the pack is immigrants, racialized persons, older workers, and the LGBTQ community. And then they struggle on the Indigenous and persons with disabilities. How do I hire them? It seems to be harder for them to do that. So if you work with any of those groups, you might want to take that away. You might want to take that away and see that there are a lot of employers who do find that there's certain groups that they find it easier to bring on board than other groups. But I want to go back. I want to go back to a number I gave you earlier, and it's that 71%, right? So let's talk about that 71%. So the company that did that survey is called Hayes. And they do large salary surveys, HR, consulting, things like that. They did that same question in 2022, and it was 61% of Canadians were looking to move jobs, and that's risen to 71%. They also found out that if the economy recovers, because let's be honest, we're kind of in a little bit of a downturn, a little bit of a lull, as much as some industries are still hiring. If hiring picks up like it did last March, we will see 78% of the population that's working, looking at changing. And I told you that equals about 597,000 people. So why were people frustrated? Why did they want to leave? What was going on there? So number one, wages have not kept up with inflation. I don't think that's surprising anyone. And 59% intend to ask for a pay raise. The interesting thing was most of them said they were going to ask for 3 to 5%. 33% of that 59% expected 3 to 5%, and another 23% expected 10% of those people who were going to ask for a raise. They also asked employers, do you plan on giving a pay raise this year? And the employers, 51% said their people will get 3 to 5%, and another 20% said 1 to 2, and 13% said there's no pay raise. So 84% of the employers who replied to that survey said they'll get nothing to 5%. And we have a large group that's thinking 10% isn't out of range. So there's a bit of a disconnect going there between what employers are expecting. This is not surprising either. I saw a manufacturing survey out of EMC Canada, and it was the same sort of discrepancy where employers did not plan to give pay raises and employees were looking for bigger pay raises because of that stress of inflation. And when we looked at and we kind of looked at that through, are they satisfied with the current survey? Where you saw that most people were kind of no. So stress levels have increased. 59% reported that, 55% reported that, my apologies. We talked about it. Mental health is a concern. There's no way we're going to yoga and mindfulness our way out of this as much as we want to. And because the challenges we're facing we can't solve through yoga and mindfulness. I love it when my kids come home and talk about mindfulness. It's great. But someone who is overwhelmed because they're short-staffed or can't afford food or can't afford housing, there's something bigger going on there, and it will continue. So you'll see that 40% are pretty satisfied with their well-being, but that no in neither group is much bigger. And then finally, just being asked about dissatisfaction, and a lot of people were not, there is a rise in dissatisfaction levels, And this is an interesting stat. I gave you the satisfied with their current job, and 44% said they were. That number, that I'm satisfied, jumped to 48% when they said, are you satisfied with your company? Like, it was this big jump. And then they said, here's the interesting thing, are you satisfied with your current manager? So I jumped to 52%. We've always talked about how people are loyal to their manager over their company and their job. It just kind of reinforced that even in the midst of everything that's going on, if people have a great direct manager, that's one of the things that's probably keeping them in the company. And this is just kind of further evidence of that. Another point here. Just have to find it. The part I want to talk about, this is what I want to talk about, is that neither group. You see how it's the green one? That's the group we have to be concerned about. Because they're not satisfied, they're not dissatisfied, they're indifferent. And indifference will kill us. It will kill our company, it'll kill our job, it'll kill our managers, it'll kill the economy. So that indifference is a big challenge. And that indifference probably comes out of some of the mental health challenges that are out there. If you know anyone with depression, indifference, you kind of go through emotions and then indifference sets in. So that's really the big concern for me, is that indifference part of you're neither happy nor satisfied. You're kind of in this middle ground and there's a lot of gray. So that's something to consider. So here we go. We're going to talk about it. What do we think is on the docket for 2024 and how do we get ready? Like I said, I want to acknowledge the economy is in a tough spot. Okay? Inflation's high, interest rates are not great. Whatever you want to call it, I like to call it a downturn. I'm not sure we're full recession, but someone told me we were. So I'm just going to call it a downturn. Many of us are kind of just waiting. Feel that way? I kind of feel that way. Like we're just waiting for the Bank of Canada for somebody to do something. And so I think on the part of employers and on job seekers, they're in that waiting mode. So I want us to keep that in mind while I do this. And I want to say again, I'm not a futurist. I want to put a caveat on it. And kind of let's dig into some of this stuff. So let's talk about employer demand. What do I think is going to happen? This is what I know is already happening. We're already seeing layoffs and closures. It's adjustments out of COVID. It's small businesses can't make it. But it's some really big businesses too are in layoff mode. We're just not hearing about it. So I talked to somebody and they're like, did you know so-and-so just laid off? And I'm like, what? Or did you know so-and-so just dropped the shift? So they're not coming up on the newspaper. And I think for a while, we will continue to see this. And until somebody big goes down, we won't hear about it the same way we heard about, if you remember 2008, 2008, that's when I started working in workforce planning, just as the economy all collapsed. So I'm not hearing it the same way I'm hearing about 2008. So I think it's like our hidden little secret, feels like. We may see more businesses close. We will start to see bankruptcy protections this year. And we will see some jobs disappear. I do believe that will happen. It won't happen in every industry. I'm going to guess, depending on, we saw a big layoff about a year and a half ago, software developers and tech. We'll see things like that. We're like, what happened there? Like, they thought that was fantastic. We'll see that sort of thing happening. Some will try to save themselves by cutting management, which I just told you middle managers are already overwhelmed and they're starting to burn out. They'll try that approach first, or they'll cut worker hours. So those are things that they will do this year. Those companies that are struggling, those industries that are struggling, we will see that. But I just feel like it's going to be small and kind of leaky, and so we won't get the big, until someone really big goes down and takes out a bunch of the economy, we won't see that. Organizations that support job seekers have started to tell me that it's harder to connect companies to talent, and it will continue to get harder. And the reason for that is our human resources functions are starting to be centralized in really, really big companies, and they're often not in our backyard. I was talking to some people up in Dufferin, and this is really happening up in Dufferin. They're like, we can't get anybody to a table because HR is in Caledon, and this HR is in Quebec, and this HR, and they used to come to our tables, but they're not anymore because They just don't know who we are. They don't know why they're coming. So I think that will continue to happen. So if we don't have those companies sitting at our tables, decisions are not made locally. There's no one to contact, and there's no one to validate our community action. So those of us who are trying to put together programs and things like that, we don't have a company to back us up because they're not local. So if you are a small company or a family-run business, we so would love to meet you, because you can help us shape what's going to happen and what we're going to do as schools, as employment service providers, as the planning board. You can actually have a much bigger voice than you probably have ever before. So I want to bring that up. It will reduce access for those really big companies to employment-ready talent pools, because the people who have the talent ready to go won't be able to connect with them. And it could hinder the development of employer-focused solutions. Our Employer One is used by the schools, economic development. They take that data and they do things with it. They create strategies. And those companies that don't understand that local perspective won't get that voice heard at the table. So those other companies that are local, that do hit locally, much bigger voice than probably ever before. Where might there be a bright light? If you are hiring part-time, you are hiring a part-time workforce that does not require as many skills, there is a very big talent pool out there, and I think it will continue even with the reduction of international students, because they were the ones driving most of that pool. There's still going to be a fair number. Like, let's be honest. You know, it was 30,000 last year at Conestoga, and I think most of George and Dufferin's campus was international students. Even with some of those cuts, there will still be a fair number of people in that pool. And people who need those jobs and are in Canada and haven't been able to access those jobs maybe have a chance now. So those high schoolers who want that first work experience or that second work experience, I call them school shifters. They're parents who have to they can't afford childcare before and after school, so they have to work a school shift. And some of our persons with disabilities who could work maybe 15, 16 hours max, we have the opportunity to move them into our labor pool this year so much more, especially with those shortages. September, October, I don't know if anyone went to a mall, but did you see the signs at malls where like, we're not hiring because they were so inundated? Or the Dollar Tree national hiring event where there are like 1,000 people, you know? That's what it was. But we have the opportunity to actually now look and actually have some of these people, like, I'm from Paris, it's a very small town. When I go into fast food or a store, I see high schoolers. When I come to Waterloo region, they're missing. So we're delaying their first work experience tremendously. And I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I'm just saying that they're not getting, the opportunities aren't there the same way they used to be because there's such a much bigger pool to pull from. And I think talking to employers are very optimistic about coming out of the downturn. I really do believe that, you know, they're struggling, but they're seeing some light. It's not a train. That they feel that there's some opportunity to come out of this. I don't think we're going to go back to last March. Don't get me wrong. We're not going back to that crazy. But we're going back to some demand again and getting some people off of some unemployment or getting some people new to the market who maybe couldn't be there before. So I do feel that employers are very optimistic about what's coming out of it all. Something a little more tangible for you, because I just spoke very not stat at all. Our Employer One survey does ask employers if they plan to hire in 2024. But of course you're wondering how many and when. And so our employers give us a range. So they go, we think we're gonna hire between this and this. So are about 200 employers said about 850 jobs. That was their conservative estimate for the year for 2024. I will point out that we took a bit of a hit this year on our Employer One because there's a lot of surveys going on, and we love our economic development for all their surveys, but it kind of affected our survey this year. But what we found was that when I did some math, there's actually, the employers are planning on hiring more people per employer than when we had bigger numbers. So in the past, they thought, oh, we'll hire about 2.7. That was our average with the number of people they thought they would hire versus the employers. They were like 2.7. And we found that this year, it's about 3.9. So as much as we have fewer employers and their number is smaller, more of them felt they could maybe hire that extra person in the upcoming year for some reason. So that kind of tells me there's a little bit of optimism that even if it's not going to be now, it will be eventually. So let's talk about some of those companies and what's affecting their hiring. So manufacturing is telling us it'll be Q4. So it'll be October-ish before they really think they're going to be able to ramp up. There's a little bit of optimism with a couple of them, maybe August, September. But they said if we have something extra, we'll just hire temporary workers through an agency. So that's kind of their solution. Like if we ramp up, and heaven forbid, June, we'll just hire temporary workers or summer students. So they're kind of looking for those really quick gap solutions. It does feel very status quo with them. They used to be some of our biggest job posters, and we're not seeing those numbers anymore. Other industries now have much more job postings. But it's also, when I spoke industry to industry, it depended on who they were supporting and building product for. So construction, so those who are building construction materials were like, we think it'll be this quarter, but if our construction companies have a problem, we might not pick up till this. So they were very specific, and whereas others were like, well, we're talking to the investment in St. Thomas, and if that goes through and we get to pick as one of their vendors, that might change our plans for the next year. So they were very cards close, but it really depended on what they were going to be supporting. The food ones tended to be a little more optimistic because we all need to eat. And so it is really, going to food processing is recession-proof, right? Because we all have to eat. So it was a lot of optimism, but guarded in some cases a little more, but they're really saying Q4 before we really start to see growth in those postings and that demand, unless something happens. Construction, so much will depend on material supplies being available and how much they cost. And this is like, because costs like the price of gas will be built into the cost of those materials, which is not great news because you all know we need housing. And so the ability of construction to upsize, to hire, to do all that stuff is really dependent on all of those things. And when they do, it's probably trades helpers and laborers is going to be their number one ask. I kind of asked a couple places, and they're like, yeah, we could use some plumbers, but maybe not. We can maybe get by with who we have, or we can just contract, we can subcontract. So that was kind of like their thought processes. Maybe we don't have to hire, but we're definitely going to want those people who've got like a boot camp behind them, you know. So that sort of situation arose. Transportation and warehousing will depend on retail, manufacturing, and construction. So depending on what happens in those will determine what type of truck drivers we need. There is some concern. So if companies aren't needing to move as much product, transportation may not need as many drivers. They think they'll need who they have. So, but the other concern I've heard is the November election in the U.S. is a very big concern with a lot of transportation companies and what are they going to be able to grow. You know, last thing they want is like a made in America sort of thing to go through, and what kind of protections and tariffs might show up. That will affect transportation demand, because if we can't cross the border as much as we used to be able to, Canada's just not big enough for that many drivers. So that will be a big concern. So we'll watch construction manufacturing, because we know that the side effect of that will be how many drivers do we need. And those drivers are getting older. So there's also attrition that help them just keep their numbers pretty stable. My favorite one, because I'm in it. Education, healthcare and assistance, nonprofit, public admin, all those really basic, this is our community organizations. Our hiring is going to be replacement and growth based. We are going to have to replace people who leave us. We're going to have to replace people who retire. I was talking about the 55-year-olds. I don't know if you guys heard, but like 2-3 years ago, if teachers and nurses could access their pension, they were jumping. And now I'm hearing that firefighters are doing the same. And doctors don't stay till they're 75 anymore. They're now thinking about leaving in their 60s. So we have a lot of upturn in that space. And for the upcoming year, short-staffed is going to be our reality. Which is going to be, how do we keep who we have when we, how do we talk about burnout? How do we talk about all of those things? How do we keep ourselves going? whether you're in education, healthcare, and assistance, nonprofit, or public admin. And I added public admin because I don't know if you guys heard, but the government's looking at training for urban firefighters because of the fire season and its expectations this year. And so they fully expect they're going to take urban firefighters, train them how to fight forest fires, and send them up north to Quebec because there's not enough firefighters who have the skill sets to fight forest fires, not including our own urban forests. And heaven forbid, Pride Park goes up. You know, like that's not what we want to see. So we are, even public admin is facing some of those challenges. And I believe just recently there's a shortage of police officers as well, that we could use a few police officers. So these groups are going to stay short-staffed. It's going to affect the services we can give to our community, very much so. Retail, accommodation and food, arts, entertainment, and rec, 100% depending on how much money we have to spend. So it's going to be a challenge for those groups because if discretionary income starts to disappear because we're all paying, you know, heaven forbid, interest rates go up or stay stable much longer, you know, we're going to have less money. And when we have less money, we can't spend it on plane tickets, we can't spend it on a really great meal out, and we can't spend it shopping. And some of us love retail therapy, so that's not going to go well for us, right? So that's going to really depend on that as well. So you start to see how this is like, I know we're talking about mini markets. These are like big impacts where what happens in one is affecting everybody else. So probably the most we've ever been connected in an economy, tremendously. Even though we, you know, I have this challenge, you have this challenge, but if you do that, we're both screwed. So those are the sorts of situations we're thinking of. And professional, scientific, and technical, it will depend on industry connections and who you support. So if construction has problems, like big infrastructure projects, we're going to have engineering and architectural firms who are going to have big challenges ahead of them because projects are not moving forward. So I've got this person and project hours is how I pay them. Am I going to have to let them go? Or tech-based. So what if AI replaces our tech people? You know, there's so many questions out there right now that this year is a year of uncertainty. I'll be honest to that. And business services, so if you're supporting businesses through placement or you're supporting them through cleaning or your finance insurance, I just think your growth is going to be slow. It's going to be very, very slow. I did hear that one insurance company needs a bunch of people, amazing, but I'm not sure that the whole industry is going to go that way or that it's going to be quite the same growth that it's been in the past. It seems to be kind of slow for those groups. And heaven forbid, if small businesses have to cut their budgets, businesses supports will struggle. So that's kind of how we're all interconnected on this front. But there's optimism we can hire at some point. I didn't cover one thing. Did our lights go out? Yeah. And you're probably wondering, Charlene, you didn't talk about apprenticeship and skilled trades. What's going on with them? So let me kind of crystal ball some skilled trade stuff. We will continue to see a gap between what people are registering for and what employers need. There's a bit of a gap existing now. We looked at our top 5 apprenticeships. We get some data through the ministry of like what did people apply to? And the top 5 are, here we go, electrician, millwright, plumber, auto service tech, truck and coach. 4 of those 5 are mandatory compulsory trades. So you have to register, you have to become an apprentice, right? So, but when we looked at job postings, there were more, what did I do? There were more job postings than there were registrants. No, there were fewer job postings than there were registrants for plumbers and electricians. So as much as it's great, I love it, plumbers, electricians, let's go, the demand for them from a digital perspective is not there. Versus auto service techs and truck and coach, this is what I'm telling you, was 4 times the number of registrants. So I don't know about you, but my kid's planning to go to heavy duty equipment mechanic. I'm so excited for his future because he's probably going to get scooped up before he ever finishes, right? And so those sorts of things are really, really important. So that we're going to see that. And as I said, electricians was number 1. And the most in demand was that auto service tech. when we look at Find Your Job, auto service tech was number 1 in demand, and then it was millwrights. So the number 2 most registered one, and then number 4. That's actually what the demand is. And I think we're going to continue to see that. The millwrights do lots of different things. I know my dad was one. If you'd asked if my dad hadn't been a millwright, I never would have had any idea what they do, but my dad was one, so I know exactly what he does. He's a jack of all trades, master of none. He picks up a manual and he goes. So those sorts of skill sets are highly valuable. And then auto service techs, there's just so much there now, especially with EV batteries and so much more coming online, that there's dealerships need them, which is retail, but also garages need them, and there are other services. So there's so much opportunity there for those 2 trades. One of the things, though, that did come up as well in that data we received is that in 2022, 2023, the registrants to those skilled trades, and often people register with like I said, they register with the ministry because it's compulsory. You have to do an apprenticeship. So you need an RTA, which is a registered trade agreement. I think I got that right. So they have to. So we get data about those 23 compulsory. And what we found was there was less diversity in those applicants than had been in the past 2 years. So they tended to be more males. They tend not to have checked any, so the government has diversity boxes. They have person with disability, racialized, newcomer, women. So we tended to find that the ones who were registering the last time we had the data, weren't quite as diverse as they had been previously. That doesn't mean that skilled tradespeople are not diverse. It's possible they're looking more at those voluntary trades, and so they're opting into college diploma programs. Like my son will, as a heavy-duty mechanic. He could do a college diploma versus having to do an apprenticeship. So we'll probably see some more of that. Unfortunately, I can't get that data. Colleges don't quite organize their data that way. So it's a feeling I have for the next year is we will continue to see diversity in skilled trades, but we might not see it in the data. So that's one thing I do want to bring up. We will not see a bump in skilled trades people immigrating to Canada. I don't think we'll see that in the next year. I don't know how we would see it. One of the challenges, and I have this question asked me a lot, is like, can't we just like have people immigrate who have skilled trades? You can, if they're, from what I understand from employers, if they come from a country where it's very similar to Canada, and has systems very similar to Canada, and have the money, the language, and some education behind them. And a carpenter in many parts of the world is not going to have the English language to get the points to be able to immigrate to Canada. So our solution has to be whoever's here. And I will be honest, skilled trade shortages are international. There is an international shortage of machinists, millwrights, electricians, plumbers. So to try and convince them to come, they don't have the money to come, the language, or the education to even get the points to get in the country. It's not going to be an international solution. It has to be you're here in the country, how can we train you, how can we move you? And so hopefully in the next year we start to understand that better, and then we start creating more of those solutions. That's my hope for our next year ahead of us. So who's going to be working in 2024? Let's talk about newcomers, because there's so much information about newcomers. So 39,000 people could make Waterloo Wellington Dufferin their home between 2024 and 2026. Where are they going to live? And who's going to build the houses? But what we do is we looked at, there were about 1.65 immigrants due to come in the country between 2024 and 2026. Ontario takes 48% statistically. That's what we have at the last census. The Waterloo Wellington Dufferin takes 6% of that 48%. That's 39,000 people in 3 years. That's more people showing up this year, next year, the year after, than showed up between 2016 and 2021. That is not including international students, refugees, or temporary workers. So the numbers actually be bigger. Okay? So we're going to have a lot of people in our market, a lot of highly educated people in our market. And some groups are having more success than others. We looked at different diversity groups, people who identified as different groups, and we found in all 3 areas, our area of identifying immigrants struggled. It didn't matter, well, in Dufferin, it didn't matter what their education level was. In Wellington, it didn't matter when they arrived. Historically, when an immigrant arrives, they find it easier to get work as they've been here longer because they kind of they get used to the culture, they get used to the work environment. It didn't matter. And here in Waterloo, it was just the whole population. So there's a real challenge there. We found that our Southeast Asian identifying immigrants, most of the time, 40 to 60% didn't have high school, which could be a blessing because I just told you half of the jobs in demand don't require high school. But at the same time, they might not have the language skills and could be struggling and maybe aren't being able to access language services. If you don't know, language services in Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin are it's one of the things we need most in our area because we can't get everybody English level up to speed to move forward. So those sorts of things are really important because we're going to continue to see people coming in. So the pool will grow as a whole bunch of people are leaving, a whole bunch of new people are coming in. All of the Ukrainians who could have come to Canada under QAT are here. So if you're Ukrainian, welcome. But what we have discovered is we might see more of them leaving Canada to move on to other opportunities. We've already started to see it. I've spoken to the woman who, the volunteer group, and she's already seeing people who've moved on. It varied for different reasons. They had, there was other opportunities in other places around the world, or they had relationships with other people in other places around the world. And quite a few of those Ukrainians do need English language training. So all the Ukrainians are here. So if you're thinking more showing up, nope, they're not. But I do believe the Afghanistan refugees are still in the process of arrival at this point. So I talked a little about this. I'm going to kind of skip over this one. The student numbers are going to decrease. So we have opportunity to look at other groups this year. This one doesn't get talked about as much. We talk about our international students and then filling part-time roles, but we don't talk about what's happening to them after they're graduating. So a lot of them are working. They're not working jobs, we'll let them stay in the country. They graduate, they wait. Jenny, help me out. 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get their work permit? Yeah. And then they can start looking for a job that will let them stay in the country that has to be a certain type of knock code with a certain type of skill level. So a lot of companies are hiring international students thinking, oh, they'll stay on past graduation. But those companies don't recognize that they can't keep those people in the country with the jobs they're offering. So they're actually creating their own rotating workforce. And we're going to see some companies, finally, it's going to dawn on them this year, that, we're just rotating out, 2,000 people or 100 people every year. Are we okay with that, or are we not okay with that? And we also need to find jobs for all these graduating students because many of them plan to stay. And they are, if you've met some of them, they're incredible professionals, and they've come here to build more skills. So they're highly skilled and well-educated. And so it's a bit of a struggle because demand is telling us we don't need that, but they're here. So we're having a bit of, it's a different type of skills mismatch we've ever seen before. Our older workers. So in 2008, we saw a lot of our older workers come back because their pension couldn't cover expenses. I believe we will see that again this year. We will see older workers who have left. Maybe they took early CPP or they got an early pension because they're public. They're coming back. Their pensions aren't going to cover it. So we have potential as employers to tap into their skills and experience and build our companies better. Or, did I just say 45 to 54-year-olds are leaving? We've got some built-in mentors potentially. There are many older workers who would probably love to come back and build the next generation, right? So I do believe we will see more of them come, but in the long run, we're going to see more of them leave, especially that teacher, nurse, those who can access early pensions, or those who have traditionally stayed past 65, like doctors. So it'll be really dependent on your industry here as to, if I were 60 plus, I might want a retail job. You and I can work that out. But if I were getting close to that and I was just tired, I might be ready to retire. If I were in education or healthcare. So it's kind of a mixed bag where we will see some coming back, and we will see others who are ready to leave, and maybe they need a break before they can come back, but maybe they'll come back. But I think what we'll see overall is they're leaving. But you might catch an older worker or two who's looking for something to supplement their pension. I haven't talked too much about persons with disabilities because there's not a lot of statistics on persons with disabilities. I can tell you that 27% of the Canadian population does have a disability. Those are the top disabilities. So around pain, flexibility, mobility, if you have somebody who's 55 and is a tradesperson and has arthritis, they're part of that 27%. This will grow. Actually, mental health was the one that grew the biggest. I think it went from low 30% to high 30%. We'll get more data in May. That's when the Canadian Survey on Disability will be released. And so if you are interested in this workforce, watch our socials because we'll be pulling stuff from that data to share on social media. But I think we will see more people identifying as having disabilities. Our young kids are happy to tell you they have one, especially if they have a learning disability. Like, I have ADHD. And you're like, okay, and how do we cope with that? And they're like, this is my plan. And you're like, fantastic. And they're used to working with people who are from all over and who have various things going on. So I think we will see that next year. There's opportunity to take some of those older workers and give them part-time shifts. And if you do have older workers, you might want to start talking about gradual exit plans. So sit down with your older workers and say, hey, do you want to kind of like phase yourself out and give yourself some free time to go to Florida? You might, I think that will be something we'll see more of happening in the next year, so that we can hold on to the talent we've got, we can hold on to that organizational knowledge just a little bit longer. And you'll phase out over 5 years instead of 3. Again, there's not a lot of data on Indigenous persons. It's growing, but it's still a bit of a struggle. The one thing I do want to point out is that during the pandemic and shortly thereafter, we saw the employment rate for Indigenous persons start to kind of come closer to the employment rate for non-Indigenous persons. And in the past year, it has started to reopen. So we're not sure what's happening there. I've got a couple of requests into some of my colleagues who are in that space and having some of those conversations. But we are seeing that there's a bit of a reversal, which goes back to that, is there an anti-diversity backlash in Canada? Or have our Indigenous persons attempted to work and they're finding it's not working for them for whatever reason, and then what do we do about that? There's a local organization called NEPAM, and they focused on urban Indigenous youth, and Indigenous youth do look for culturally sensitive spaces, so we'll look at that. So I'm going to go really quickly through this so I give you a few minutes to talk to each other. So what are we going to see? 2024 and beyond. We have a well-educated, skilled workforce. We have a new skills mismatch. Did people go through the programs needed to do the jobs that we need to have done? Employers will struggle to fill lower paid and lower skilled roles. Why? Because our population is more educated than they've ever been before. So it's going to be a struggle. We also have an incredibly diverse workforce. I don't know if everyone remembered last year, Canada Guelph, we're like 1 in 3 diversity. So we have to acknowledge, those employers who acknowledge and hire that diversity will shift out of the downturn faster. I really do believe that. There's been some statistics by Lloyd's of London and things like that around how diversity can grow your business and what are the returns on diversity. So those who do choose that diversity will come out faster. Why? Because they can access and understand a bigger talent pool. Bigger talent pool means better talent. That greater awareness of mental health. And people want to hear about supports from employers. So, flexible work, hybrid work, good vacation and benefits, community connections. Like, are you connected? Do you understand mental health? Can you refer me to someone? What's the EAP look like? Employee assistance program. So lots of different things there on mental health. Younger generations are going to influence up as much as older generations influence down. We're going to see young people want to influence up to their managers and give them ideas, and managers be receptive to it. I don't think that's going to. Youth will take longer to get that first work experience. And we have to acknowledge that when I was in high school, I had friends who were 15 and were working. My kid can't get a job at 15. He's tried. And so have his cousins. And the only one who did was he was working for a ski club. So it's going to take them longer. It could be 17, 18, 19 before that first work experience. And if we're thinking about what it was like when we were younger, we're like, yeah, I have like a couple by here. What's going on? That will be a struggle. And the managers in your organization are everything, as evidenced by who are people happy with and where does that satisfaction lie. Managers, I think, still will make or break companies. And so we want to make sure that our managers are ready for all of this. You ready? So I'd like you guys to take some time, think about everything I've told you. We're about 10 minutes now. I spoke longer than I intended, but we're about 10 minutes out. So think at your tables, like think about what shocked you, what's worrying you. Think about your business, the customers you have, the clients you serve, your own children and family members, your community. Like you have that conversation, and then we're going to give out you some paper. We'd like to know. So we do a local labor market plan every year. We pull a whole bunch of statistics. Some we have to put in there, some we get to pick. We want to know, where do you want to see an update? You're like, I really love this stat, and I want an update on this stat by the end of the year. We would greatly appreciate that feedback because it helps us develop something that you want. And so I'm going to, and my staff going to hand out paper. All right. And I think I've got some markers somewhere. It's also with the paper. So if you guys want to take 10 minutes and kind of do that, if you have to leave early, this is your chance to leave early, but we'll kind of like at 3 o'clock, wish you all the best and see you on your way. Okay? So I'm going to give you that time to have those conversations.